Isn't that just super groovy intro music there?
Yeah, it's very muzak, isn't it? I'm loving it.
Yeah, yeah, same here. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Self-Publishing Insiders. Today, I'm thrilled to welcome on the show with us Emma Dhesi. She is a best-selling author and certified book coach who educates and inspires first-time authors to fulfill a calling and write their debut novel. Um, she does this by drawing from her own success and training. And Emma guides writers to finish their first book through detailed feedback, accountability check ins, and compassionate support in her year long one on one mentorship.
Mm.
Emma's coming to us from Edinburgh, Scotland, where she lives with her husband, with 3 children, 3 cats, and she's just passionate about helping authors achieve their dreams through individualized mentoring. Now, here's what's really cool. Today, we're here to talk about Emma's 4 pillars to author success. That includes awareness, acceptance, growth, and fun.
Mm.
And in a minute here, I'm going to pop up a cheat sheet so that you can follow along with us during this conversation as we talk about those 4 pillars of author success. So before I keep rambling on forever here, Emma, welcome. We're so happy that you're
Hey,
here.
hi Jim, thanks so much. It's lovely to be here. I'm really pleased to get a chance to chat to you. We've been in email contact for a little while, so it's lovely to actually be able to say hello.
Hello. We're happy to have you here. Um, Anybody, if you want to follow along with Emma's 4 pillars of author success, you could step away for a moment. We'll wait for you. Step away for a moment. Go and grab this this cheat sheet here, because this is going to be a really good conversation. I feel I was looking through the cheat sheet this morning and going through it and picking it apart. And what's interesting to me is that like you can apply these rules to your life or to any endeavor that you want to embark upon. Would you agree with that? What do you think?
100%, I would agree with that. Yes, it's something I sort of notice mostly in the writing sphere,
Mhm.
in the book world. But
Yeah.
equally, if you're someone who provides author services as well, and you're in the entrepreneurial space, I think you'll definitely resonate with all 4 of these. But I think
Mhm.
anything that we do is, relationships that we've got. Maybe if you're in the corporate space, you'll recognize some of these as well. It's and I think that's what makes them so relatable as well, is that you can take them into any situation that you're in that you're maybe finding a bit challenging and need
Yeah.
a reminder that this is okay, I've got this.
Well, I plan to print it out and put it up on my wall and just use it across the board for the different things that I'm working on. Seriously, it's that good. Emma, can you help us kind of set the foundation a little bit? And maybe for people who aren't familiar with you yet, can you give us a little bit of your background and what led up to your conception of these 4 pillars of author success?
Yeah, sure. So
Okay.
as you read in my bio, I work with debut novelists particularly, but I
Okay.
do work over the course of a year, this year mentorship with people who are writing their first novel. So I see them go through all of these pillars, but I
Yeah.
also recognize it from my own writing life as well. I write fiction as well as coaching, and I go through all of these different stages as well. And when I looked around on the internet as well, I saw that people go through them all the time too. And so as I was kind of hearing what people are saying, looking at questions people are asking, seeing what my clients are going through, noticing the
Yeah.
struggles of my own, I was like, we've all got some things in
Oh,
common.
yeah.
And so the 4 pillars sort of came out of that. But I've been writing for a long time, like a lot of people who are
Hmm.
listening. I'm sure I've been writing since I was a child, through my teen years, my 20s, my 30s, my 40s, and evolving all the time. But it wasn't until I was coming up to my 40th birthday and I still hadn't finished that first book, but the itch wouldn't go away. And
Yeah.
I remember just thinking, right, Emma, sort yourself out. Make a
There's
decision.
something about that 40th birthday for a lot of us that kind of shakes you up a little bit.
It does. It really, really does. In my head, I get in trouble for saying this, but in my head, I was thinking, that's it. You're hitting middle age now, and you still haven't done this thing. So make the decision, do it or let it go and move on with your life. So I thought, okay, I'll make this decision to write the first draft. That was all the promise I made to myself. Write the first draft, and then I can decide, did I love that experience? Was that fun and I enjoyed it and it was what I thought it would be? Or was it awful? Was it just the most miserable experience I've ever had and I never want to do it again? But I would know either way. And then also I'd be able to say, okay, I've done that thing that I said I wanted to do, which was write a book. And finally I've done it. So it took me about 2 years to write the first draft.
Okay, that's not so bad.
And then I probably took another 4 years to do the revisions, which I think is pretty standard. But I got to the end of it and I loved it. I had enjoyed the process. I'd found it the right level of challenge to keep me kind of stimulated and interested, but feel like I was really working towards something. And I remember when I published that book, thinking, I'll bet you there's other women out there who are like me, who had been stay-at-home moms, who perhaps felt they'd left it too late, that their time had been and gone. And I remember at that early on thinking, oh, no, there are other women like me. I'm not unusual, and I want to be able to help them in any way, which way that I can. And so, I continued working, progressing, learning my craft, learning my skills, and then eventually started coaching others to do the same thing, to write their first book. And then a year ago, I came across Jenny Nash, who runs Author Accelerator, and about whether to do the certification. And I'll be honest, I thought, oh, it might help me write a better book as well. So maybe they'll get the double whammy from this. So I went through the Author Accelerator certification and became certified last year. And it was a really rigorous training, I have to admit, but it really gave me a whole new set of language to use, gave me some new ways to think about how I work with my clients. And I hope anyway that it's made me a better writer as well.
I love
it.
There's something to be said about mentorship and coaching, because you don't know what you don't know, even if you've been doing the thing for years or decades or more. You can break down bad habits, reevaluate those habits, and hopefully find new ways of going forward. And there's one key word you mentioned as you're talking about your background, and thank you for that. You mentioned the word challenge, and I think it's worth mentioning that you may love the process, but I would bet you didn't love every single little bit of the process. And those challenges, if you can learn to sort of embrace the discomfort and work through that and start getting, I've heard this term used before, or this phrase used before, if you can get comfortable being uncomfortable and start pushing through that, it just makes the whole experience so much more rewarding.
It does. Yeah, no, for sure. I did not love every moment of that, even the challenging bits. And, it being my first book and I don't plot, then of course I went down so many different wrong avenues and had to figure out, how do I pull this story back? And I remember sometimes I could wheel it back round and into the main storyline. But I do remember, at least on one occasion, having to just go, okay, I need to go back 4 or 5 chapters back to the main route and then start and keep moving forward again. But, and I was frustrated at the time, but when I look back, I realized that was such an important part of my learning. It was invaluable, and nobody could teach me that. I had to go through it. And something I say all the time, you learn to write a book by writing a book. That's what you have to do. It's a job you learn on the job.
Absolutely. And it's not going to be easy the first time around. I want to just show people just what the 4 pillars document looks like. So there's Emma's address where you can download those 4 pillars of author success cheat sheet. If you want to go grab it now and follow along as we go through this conversation, or download it later, you can do that too, but just follow that link there and you can get it. And if you're like me, you're going to pin it on your wall for use at another time. Okay, shall we dive into the 4 pillars?
Yes, let's dive in. So as you'll have seen there, that pillar number 1 is awareness. And I think this is one that is applicable right at the beginning, when you're maybe just starting to write your first paragraphs or your first short story, you're maybe attending that very first workshop, all the way through to, like some of our indie authors who have published hundreds of books. So I think everywhere along. But it's just the idea of awareness is that we simply have that awareness of where we are in the writing and publishing landscape. And wherever it is, it's absolutely fine. That's where we're at. But just knowing that, okay, I've literally come through the gate. I've got so much to learn. And that's a really exciting place to be, by the way, is that you're right at the beginning of that. This is going to be such a fun journey for you. So knowing that that's there, or it might be that you've finished that first draft. And so there's awareness, okay, I've come this far. Maybe you've published that first book, or you've published your second book. Maybe, if we're thinking beyond the writing itself, maybe there's the marketing side of it. You've done your first podcast, you've done your first live session with Draft Digital. You've maybe written your first blog post for somebody else. All the way along the line, there is a first, there is a first, there is a first. And just being a kind of aware of where you are in that landscape, how far you've come. And of course, how far there is to go. There's always more to learn. None of us are ever going to have this nailed and be and know it all. So that level of awareness, I think, is just a really good first pillar to kind of be okay with and acknowledge. I think it's there's nothing wrong with being right through the gate, and of course, there's nothing wrong with having published your 100th book. So awareness.
That's very good. Yeah, you said something there that kind of stood out to me, Emma, and you mentioned that when you become aware that there's so much to learn, how that could be exciting. And I have to admit, sometimes for me, when I'm trying something new, and I realize, oh my gosh, I have such a long way to go. There's so much to learn here. It can feel exciting, absolutely, but I can also feel like, oh my God, I have so much more to learn. There's so much. I have to educate myself. But if you don't look at the entire elephant at once. You just kind of look at those little bits and chunks. And even if you're just kind of 3 bites into it, you realize, oh, I've got this. And every little chunk that you sort of bite off there feeds into the next, and you grow. I think you can grow faster than you might realize.
Yeah, absolutely. 100% agree with you on that. That sometimes when we are at the beginning and we are looking at something new, I'm thinking about like Facebook ads, for example. A lot of people are very, very intimidated by that, just the thought of the dashboard alone. And so it's overwhelming, isn't it? You just think, oh my goodness, I'm never going to learn this. This is a whole new thing. But when you chunk things down into small bite-sized pieces, it becomes just simpler. You can do one little thing at a time. You're not trying to do everything at once. You're just trying to take one step in front of the other. And that's the same as writing a book, isn't it? You're not trying to write the whole 350 pages in one go. You're just trying to get that first page down. And then the next page. So yeah, overwhelm's a whole other thing that we could do a whole other chit chat on. But but awareness, I think it's important just to be aware. Take your eyes up from the page, look around and see what's going on in the world, particularly if you're an indie, see what's going on out there, because there's so many exciting things happening.
Yes, I want to bring up a quick comment here from Rod Gilly, who says, I heard the word fun in all caps, he says, with an exclamation point. So many new writers forget, Rod continues, so many new writers forget that it is supposed to be fun. And it really is one of the most fun things you can do. It is a lot of hard work. It pays with happy in the heart. Thank you for that, Rod.
Happy in the heart. Yeah, exactly. Excellent. And we will come to that. In fact, we will come to that. But you're absolutely right, Rod Gilly. It's fun is a vital part of this. We want it to be challenging as well, because if it wasn't challenging, everyone would be doing it, and where would be the fun in that?
Growth is in the challenge.
Yes, it is. So that's our pillar number 1, is that idea of awareness.
Okay. Got it.
And then
I'm writing down notes.
So then our pillar number 2 is acceptance.
Okay.
And they're kind of closely aligned, but I think there is a difference. So if you're like me, you're always chasing the next thing, the next thing, the next thing. Okay, I've written 1 book, I want to write 2. I've got 1 sale, I want 2. I've got 100 sales, I want 200 sales. I've done 1 podcast, I want to do 5 podcasts. I'm always chasing the next thing. And this has been a real big one for me, and I'm getting better at it as I get a bit older, but just sort of accepting I'm where I'm at. And I'm where I'm at because I started at a certain time. I'm able to devote a certain amount of time to my writing. I also do author services, so that takes time away from my writing. So there's all kinds of things that are going on in our lives. There will be people who have got full-time jobs, caring responsibilities, kids, perhaps a chronic health condition, all sorts of things going on in our lives that have an impact on how much work that we can do on our writing in any one day or week.
Yeah.
And there's a level at which we kind of have to accept that that's where we're at, that's okay.
But Emma, but this author over here writes 5,000 words a day. I want to be just like him.
Yeah, so no, blinkers on. We have to have our blinkers on to a degree with this. And we have to, you've heard the phrase, stay in your lane, or we all know the dreaded comparisonitis feeling. So we have to kind of just manage that and try and push that to the side. Yeah, because, so-and-so down the road, they've maybe got 10 books published, whereas you've only got 2, but that's because they started earlier. They've been doing this a lot longer.
Yeah.
It was my friend CJ Hunt who kind of really helped crystallize this for me. I was having fear of missing out, and I was feeling the comparisonitis with some of the other writers that I was seeing around.
It's very easy to do.
Oh, so easy, especially if you go to some of the indie conferences and you see the people up on the panels. It's really hard to not feel, I wish I was them up there.
Well, yeah, because you're trying to protect yourself forward 5 years or even 10 years in some cases. Instead of just instead of having that awareness and accepting where you are.
Yeah. Yay. So that kind of by acceptance. So let me just finish that thought actually, because what she was saying to me was, if you say you're the type of writer who has like 4 or 5 projects on the go at one time, and you love that variety, you love being able to dip in and out of the different projects. There's nothing wrong with that at all, but there's an awareness and an acceptance that it's going to take you longer to get to where you want to go with those books because you're not, you're doing lots of different things. Whereas if I was more like, I'm thinking of Kirsten Modglin, for example, who writes thriller, indie author. She's stratospheric right now. She's on the rise, but she's super focused. She knows exactly what she's writing. She knows her genre. She writes, 6-7 hours a day. She is super, super focused on those one book at a time, and she gets them out. So of course, her back catalogue is bigger than mine is, certainly. Of course, she's making that fast progress because she's choosing, she's accepting that she's going to have to put in 6-7 hours a day in order to get to where she wants to go. And when I kind of saw that difference in how we approach our careers and our writing, then I realized, okay, just take the pressure off. I don't want to write 6-7 hours a day.
Yeah.
So that's okay. That's fine. But I think the important thing to notice in this, acceptance doesn't mean you just sit back and you go, it'll happen when it happens. I don't need to stress about this. I'll just sit back. You still do have to do the work. You do have to do the plodding along, keep putting one word in front of the next, and eventually it will get you to where you want to go. So it's a subtle difference, but it's definitely there.
Okay. Emma, do you find, in your years of experience with your clients, do you find that the authors sort of naturally and organically come up with their own processes and procedures that just kind of, they work on it, but those procedures just sort of bubble up. So they finally have a process where they can spend, let's say if they don't have 6 or 7 hours to spend, they can spend 2 to 3 hours or even less, but they've got this process down now where they know that, let's say between 3:15 and 4:15 this afternoon, I am dead set. I'm going to write at this chunk because that's all I've got. Does that sort of happen? Or as a coach, do you sort of help kind of push them along toward having some kind of a focused process in place?
To a degree, I do. To a degree, I do push them along. So that's part of my job. One element of my job as their coach is to, sometimes it is tough love, and to say, well, this is where the rubber hits the road. If you want to write this book and you want to write it in a year, you've got to put in the time. But I know with like the women I work with, they are working, they have other responsibilities, they have a social life as well. Let's not forget, you know, they've
What's
got,
that? People still do that?
and many of them have other interests as well. So I do kind of talk to them about that, how they have to take responsibility for their own timetable and the energy that they put into it. So one of the discussions we might have is exactly that. So when is your most energized part of the day? And is that available to you to write at that time of the day? Okay, when is best for you? And for some, it's in the morning. They get up super early, they get it done, and then they've got the rest of the day to do whatever takes their fancy, or go to work if they're still
day job.
Yeah. And then for some of my other clients, I don't know how they do this, but they're the night owls, and so they'll start at midnight and go on till 2. Oh, not me at all, but that's what works for them. So it's a bit of understanding that. And I think this is something, because I'm working with debut authors and we have that year together, then they're slowly but surely understanding what works for me, my process. That only comes through doing the work. It only comes through consistency. And that's not to say you have to write every day, not at all, but you do have to have a degree of consistency with it, so you understand what your own process is. And I would say as well too that there's sort of and they'll come to this when they're 2 or 3 books in. They'll realize they hit the same high points and the same low points for every book that they write. So I know for me, at about 65% through the first draft, I'm just like, oh my God, I hate this story. I wish I'd never started it. It's rubbish. No one's going to read it. Even I'm bored with it. Why am I doing this? Then I kick through that and it's like, no, I've had a breakthrough. This is going to be a great story. So there's always a cycle.
That's a great comment, because with things that are challenging, if you can kind of work past that first challenge and realize the next go around that, okay, I've faced this challenge before and I got through it. This is part of the process. This is what happens. It's like public speaking. The first time you do it, if you're like me, you're like, oh my God, what am I thinking? Get me out of here. Maybe I'll faint first and they'll take me away so I won't have to even worry about it. But then as you do it again and again and again, you start to realize, well, okay, here are those same butterflies. I've had those before, and I survived. I didn't die. I didn't even faint. And then every time they bubble up, it gets a little bit easier and a little bit easier and a little bit easier. You just accept that challenging part is just part of the normal process, part of the normal process.
Yeah. And you said earlier, you were talking about that feeling of comfort with the discomfort.
Yeah.
And I think that comes with time. You realize, like, I'm first drafting something at the moment, and every time I sit down to write a new chapter, oh my God, I feel that discomfort.
Yeah.
But now, because I have no idea what's going to happen. So, but I've done it enough times now that I know if I just sit down, just start writing, something will come, something will happen. It might not stay in the book, but I need to get started in order to see what emerges from it. So definitely. So working with clients on that process and helping them understand their own process and talking them back off that ledge when they're at that point where they think, I hate this, no one's going to want to read this at all. And in fact, I did have one client who said, I don't think I'm going to need the emotional support. I'm pretty good about this. I know the story I want to tell. I'm just not that type of person. And then, of course we did. We hit that first mental block, and she's like, oh, do you remember I said I didn't think I'd need this?
Yeah, and you're like, okay, whatever.
Yeah, because we all do. We all do. Yeah.
So does that bring us to the third pillar?
It certainly does.
Hit that breakthrough?
Yes. So it brings us to that growth pillar. And we've kind of touched on this a little bit, haven't we, over the conversation? This is the hardest. It's probably the one that we're in the longest. It's the least comfortable one, is that growth pillar. But this is the sort of the grind of doing the work, of doing the job. There's no one else can do this particular bit for you. You can have all the emotional support, the brainstorming support, the technical support on how you structure a book or you structure a scene.
Mhm.
But when it comes to doing the actual writing, then that is on us. We've got to sit down and do that ourselves. And it can be really, really hard, especially if you're writing that first book, or
Yeah.
you're switching genre and you're moving into a new genre and you kind of feel like you're learning all over again. Or if you've been safe in a series that you know very well, now you're starting a new one in a new universe, that can feel
Yeah.
tricky as
Scary.
well. So these are all the challenging points. But again, it goes beyond just the writing or only the writing of the book. It goes into the publishing. I went into a writers group recently to talk to them about indie publishing, and they were all terrified because they'd never seen the back end of KDP, for example. They'd no idea, okay, well, how do you attach a book cover to the book? How does that work? What does that look like? And so that's putting a lot of people, making them feel a bit scared. Then there is the growth that comes with putting a price on your book and selling your book, and there's a lot
That
of
is kind of a
emotional
weird
growth.
that is kind of a weird wall that hits authors, like, "Oh, how do I price my book? I'm a newer author, but everybody else in my category is pricing at this level, but I don't feel like I'm worthy to price at that level. What do I do?" I can
Yeah,
understand
it's a
that.
huge one. Money blocks are massive. And then telling people about your book as well, so that's a big growth period. How do you talk about your book? How do you write about your book? How do you encourage people to go and read your book?
Yeah.
And there's all kind of issues that go along with that. But growth, 100%, it is the hardest, but it's where the biggest reward is. That's where we get the biggest reward. When we figure out that difficult scene that we were trying to get our character either into trouble or get them out of trouble, when there was a difficult conversation between two characters and we nailed it, we got it, that is where we have some growth. Through the whole of the revision period, there's so much growth that happens there.
Mhm.
And then the growth of doing that first podcast, the growth of writing that first email to your first subscriber,
Yeah.
all of these things are the growth period. And whilst they're terrifying at the beginning, they're pushing us out of that comfort zone. It
Yes.
does get easier and easier and easier until we are as comfortable as we're going to be in the discomfort, but it's the biggest reward as well.
Fantastic. I love it. That brings me to a couple of comments here. Again, one's from Rod, who says, Emma is talking about a very important point. Imposter syndrome really hurts new writers. I agree. And he also says, I say all the time, you must believe in you.
Rod, I totally agree with you. And whether you're going to be indie or you're going to go traditional, you've got to believe in your story, and you've got to believe in yourself as a storyteller if you want others to believe in you. There's no point us saying, well, it's just this little book and, it's all right. Do you want to read it? No,
Yeah,
no
that
one's
doesn't
going
quite
to do
fly,
that.
does it?
No,
If the
no.
author is quite believing in their story. And
Yeah,
on
so
to
you're
that
right.
point, our own Lexi Green says, you can have all the support in the world, but it's ultimately on you to take all that and put it into your writing. For sure. That's a
Yeah,
great
and
point.
it's all part of that, wrapped up into that imposter syndrome, of which there are many different symptoms. There's like the 5 different types of not different types of imposter syndrome, but there's 5 rules of competency. And so they show up, the symptoms of our imposter syndrome show up in different ways. And there are ways and means around this, and we can do it. We can work on ourselves up here, because this is I would say, the biggest part of writing a book. So we can absolutely work on what's going on in our minds, as well as the craft and the mechanics of putting a story together, 100%. But it's worth it. It feels so hard in the beginning, but it's so, so worth it.
It does feel really hard, like it's not worth it. But then if you can work past that, then that's how you learn that it's worth it, if you work past it.
Yeah.
Bring up another comment here from Beth. Hey, Beth. Thanks for joining. Beth says, it can be really confusing with what to do with contradictory feedback. That's such a good point. But I also think that's one of the main reasons why you should consider hiring a coach, because then you have that one dedicated voice of support instead of looking for different, or browsing YouTube channels or reading different books or whatever on the subject, and everyone's got a different opinion. But your coach gets to know you over time and know your background and can help you kind of work through that.
And knows what you're trying to do with the book. knows what it is that you're trying to say and do with that book, what you're trying to get across. Yeah, feedback is a funny one. I mean, the sort of most common advice I see given out, and I think it is true, if 3 or more people are saying the same thing, you've got to look into it. You've got to kind of investigate that. If it's something left field that people are just kind of throwing out and it's their personal opinion, then you, as Beth, as the author, as the creator, you get to use your discernment there and decide, well, do I agree with them? Do I think that's true? No, not really. Okay, I'm going to park that. But if I do think that's true, then I can put that on my list of things that I need to work through in my revisions. But I think this feeds really nicely back to what Rod was saying, and that kind of belief in yourself and belief in your story. Because if you think about it, most people who are offering feedback, they're just offering their opinion. They're not experts. They're not professionals. They're trying to write their books as well. So unless it is that you're getting feedback from somebody who you trust and who, you know, you've got a good rapport with, if it's a random comment from a critique group, I would be very careful about taking that on board and letting it infiltrate your confidence. They're just offering their opinion about that.
That's
but I
good
agree.
Advice. And it's like you're giving yourself permission to believe in yourself, even if you are a newer author. There's a reason why you're doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's never going to stop either, I think, that idea of the contradictory feedback. And one of the examples I often give in my trainings
I thought you meant that the self-doubt was never going to go away.
Well,
I was going to get up from my chair and leave.
It's different, I think. The self-doubt changes over time, I think. But the kind of contradictory response you'll get to your book, I think, is never going to go away. And one of the examples I often use is with Stephen King. You know, nobody's more famous and renowned and all the rest than he is. But if you go and look at his reviews, you're going to find a lot of 1-stars there, and people are like, what is this about? Why do people love this? I don't understand. And then you'll find 5-star reviews from people saying, this is the best thing I've ever read. So, you know, that's, and unfortunately, a kind of part of it at all levels. Yeah.
Okay.
So that's growth. The
Okay.
hardest, but the most rewarding. And then, as Rod mentioned earlier, fun. The 4th pillar is fun, because I've noticed this happened to me, and I've noticed it with other people. As soon as we decide to make that switch from a hobbyist writer to, I want to publish this book and put it out in the world, suddenly we become so earnest about our writing. We take it so seriously. This has to be like the book of a generation. This has to be perfect. And so the reasons that we came to book writing in the first place, which because it was fun, we enjoyed it, it was relaxing, it took our minds off the day-to-day stresses. Suddenly it becomes one of the day-to-day
becomes a
stress.
job, becomes work.
Yeah, it becomes your job. And so I really want to encourage people to, wherever they can and whatever stage they're at, to find those pockets of fun. Have you finished that first draft of your first ever book? Or have you finished the first draft of a book that's been on your mind for a long time? Have you done your first podcast interview? Had you made your first sale? Have you chosen your first book cover? All of these little things are moments to be celebrated and have fun with. They don't have to be huge celebrations. You know, you don't have to throw a party for it. But you yourself, as the writer, as the creator, you need to take a moment of reflection for yourself to go, wow, I just did that. That feels good. I'm really proud of myself for what I've done in this scene or in this book or on that interview that I just did. And
you're doing the thing. You're living the life.
That's it. You're doing the thing. Something that you've wanted all your life. Now you're doing it. Now you're living that dream. And that, I think, that kind of then feeds nicely back into the awareness pillar of, hey, look how much further along I am than I was, and that feels good. So one of the things I quite often say to my clients, if they're reaching a point where they're just feeling really they're feeling really down about what they're writing and they don't feel the quality of their writing is good enough, I'll say go and look at something that you wrote a year ago or 2 years ago. Do you think you're better now than you were then? And of course they are. Of course they are, because they've been practicing and putting into play everything that they've been learning. But it's not until you kind of look at it and see the changes that you've made and how you've progressed and how you now know a lot more about the craft of writing than you did 2 years ago, then you can take joy from that.
That's perfect. Now, Emma, are all of your client relationships, are they all like, year-long agreements, year-long assignments?
Pretty much, yes. So
Okay.
this is one of the commitments that I make to my writers and my writers make to themselves. Is the reason that we work for 12 months at a time is I'm working with debut novelists. It takes time to write that first book. I know that there are promises out there that you can do it in 30 days, 60 days, 90 days.
Yes.
Not,
that's why I'm asking.
That's not how I roll. It's not who I want to work with either. I want people
Right.
who are writing stories they care about. And it's women that I work with. And what I've realized is that these are stories these women have been writing for 10, 20, 30 years, but they've not yet finished. And so, if that's you and you want to finish that book, I might be the person for you, because I understand what it's like to have lots of things going on in life. I understand what it's like to have a million ideas in your head and being so in depth with the story, knowing it so well that actually you need someone to help you just draw out, what is the story really about? Who is the real character in all of this? And that takes time.
It takes time to break it all down and build it back up again.
Yeah.
Over several months. Couple comments here from look at your writing from 2 years ago. That's one fear. And then
but why do you
says,
fear it?
No, don't ask me to look at writing from 2 years ago, says Alyssa.
Absolutely. Yeah. Go back and look and see how far you've come. How else do you know? How else do you measure that progress?
Yeah.
How else can you see how far you've come?
Yep.
And I bet you, and you might be surprised to discover it's not as bad as you thought. There's always that as well.
And going back to the public speaking analogy, it's like watching yourself on video. You're like, no, not only do I hate my voice, but I hate all my mannerisms and everything else.
There's a coach that can help you with that.
I'm sure there are plenty of coaches. If somebody wants to work with you, how do they initiate that process?
Well, the first thing to do really is just go to my website, emmadesi.com. I have sort of everything there. And you can have a little look through. It gives you some more information about the structure of the year, how we work on that together. And then the next thing to do is to book a call.
Okay.
And the reason that we have a call is because a year is a long time. Whilst it flies by very, very quickly, it is also a long time. And I would say I probably spend more time with my clients than I do with my friends in real life, because we meet quite regularly and I'm so invested in their books.
Yeah.
But so we have a chat, I need to understand where you're coming from. What's your writing history, your writing life, what's that like? Not so much about the book itself. I work across genres, but what does your writing life look like? And where do you feel that your stumbling blocks are? Where do you feel that you need the most help? And through that type of discussion, I can determine whether I can help you. Is that something I can help you with? Yeah. It also gives you the opportunity to decide, okay, do I like Emma? Do I like the way she communicates? Is she somebody that I think I could take feedback from without taking it personally? Because I'm, like everybody, I'm not for everybody out there. I'm quite a plain speaker. I can be quite abrupt. I kind of say that I'm a plain speaker, but with heart, but it's not everybody's cup of tea. And it's also got to be a way. I've got to be able to communicate in a way that you understand and that makes sense to you, so that we're very clear about things going forward. And ultimately, you don't need to like me, but you've got to be able to trust me. And
I'm sure they're going to like you. I'm sure that they would like you, but you also you need to decide if the author is serious about getting to the next level too. Otherwise, it wouldn't be worth your time.
No, exactly. And, I think some writers feel that coaches are there just to take your money and run. And I promise you that is absolutely not the case. None of the coaches I know, certainly, an author's success is our success. We want to see everybody do well, because we're passionate about what we do. And, you've talked about this earlier on, and what an amazing community this is, how everybody lifts everybody up.
I don't think we were even live yet when we were were talking about that backstage.
Yeah, no, but it's
That's
so
so
true,
true.
isn't it? You lift the whole boat up. So it's, and I work with a coach too. They're invaluable, and it's wonderful having somebody on your team who is as invested in your book as you are. Because as much as our friends and family support us, they're not in the weeds with us. They're not going to read every page. They're not going to give that feedback, ask the right questions. They'll be there for the emotional support, I'm sure. But, when you think about the terminology and the jargon that we all use that's to do with the writing space, not everybody gets it. And they kind of think we're a bit crazy for talking about people who don't exist.
Well, we do all have voices in our heads talking to us all the time. Do you work with both fiction and nonfiction authors?
I work with fiction and memoir, but not
Okay.
nonfiction. So if it's a business book or a how-to book, I'm not the best person for that.
Sure.
But fiction and memoir, I certainly do. Yeah.
Okay.
There's one other service, if you're happy for me to mention it, that I do
Please.
offer, which is a manuscript evaluation. And so if you've got a manuscript and you're maybe a couple of drafts in and you're just looking for that kind of big picture structural feedback, is the character arc in place? Is the plot line working and supporting that character arc? Do I have the right sort of turning points, the right beats in the story that's working? If you're looking for that kind of big picture feedback, that's something I can help with as well. And again, people can find details about that on my website.
Okay. Emma, for an author who is kind of just getting started, maybe they're not quite ready for coaching yet, what would you recommend that they do, maybe kind of in their first couple of years when maybe they're still working on their first manuscript? What are some of the things that they can do? Maybe they're contemplating coaching yet, but they just feel like they're not quite ready yet. What are some of your suggestions for them?
I think at that stage, when you're still learning the kind of fundamentals of the craft, let's think. So if it's an online something, if you're not near other writers and you want to do something online, I think summits are a super, super way of getting some really good foundational skills. There's a lot of them around. So if you kind of do a search on that, there's a lot of people, you're bringing in experts on different topics of writing, whether it be point of view, story structure, scene structure, any element of storytelling. There'll be somebody who will be talking about it in a way that resonates with you. If you're looking for something that is in person, I recommend, trying to find, maybe there are local workshops at your library that you can go to, or there's somebody in your town who does teach creative writing. It might be a college class that's part-time, one evening a week, something like that. That's where I started. I think those are so, so great, because not only are you going to be with somebody who understands that you're at the beginner stage and you're learning those foundational skills, but it's how you start building your community as well of other writers who are at the same stage. And it might be through one of those experiences that you connect with other writers who you bond with and you get on with, and then you create those little writing groups together because you trust each other and you're encouraging each other to push forwards. So that's where I would start. I'm going to just add a word of just something to be aware of. And I go through phases of this. And sometimes my advice to writers is to put the craft books down, stop signing up for the free webinars, just because there's so many voices in your head, you just don't know which way to turn and who to trust. And I think once you get to that point, you're saturated, you're fully saturated for the time being. You've got so much information in your head. You now just need to take a break from it all and do the practice of writing. So take what you've learned and put it into practice, because that's where you'll find the differences. You can have it all intellectually and cerebrally up here, but it's not until you put pen to paper and put it into practice does it become part of your muscle memory and kind of just part of your writing repertoire. So sometimes my advice is switch it all off and just write.
Perfect. I love that. What a great place. I think that's a perfect place for us to kind of come to a conclusion of this conversation. Fantastic advice. I'm so happy that you're here today with us. I'm so happy that you reached out and you're like, hey, I want to come back on the show.
Yeah.
I'm like,
so much fun.
Back.
Thank you.
Oh, so fun. So fun. Yeah.
And you're a great interviewer, Jim. You ask such interesting questions and it's lovely because you're really listening. So that always makes it such a nice conversation.
I have the best job. I really do. I mean, we were talking backstage before we went live, and what's happening now in the book publishing industry and the indie author revolution, it's amazing. And all of you, Emma, me, Lexi, Alyssa, Beth, Guillaume, everybody listening, you're all a part of it. You're all like making history right now, whether you believe it or not, by being a part of this indie publishing community, because the publishing industry is not going back. It's all changing before our eyes, and indie authors are a huge part of it. Indie authors are the ones who are kind of driving these new trends forward. It's really exciting, and you're all part of it. So thanks everybody for being here. I'm going to go through the typical YouTube kind of obligatory statements here, so bear with me, everybody. If you would please like, share, comment, and subscribe to Drafted Digital's YouTube channel. We really appreciate that, you guys, because that helps us get the word out. It helps us to attract wonderful guests like Emma here, who come on the show and share their advice and expertise with us all. And the next thing you can do is go to d2dlive.com and bookmark that page, because if you can do that, then you'll be in the know. You'll be able to see what next week's topic and who our guest is going to be as well. So bookmark that page. And if you are an aspiring author, maybe you're just getting your feet wet, or maybe you are a successful traditionally published author who is for the first time investigating self-publishing, why not sign up for your free Drafted Digital account by going to drafttodigital.com. To all of our viewers out there, you guys, thanks for visiting week in and week out. I noticed some new names joining us this week. Welcome. We hope that you enjoyed this show. We hope that you'll tell a friend. And most sincerely, we hope that you'll come back again next week. Emma, again, thank you for your time and for your expertise and from joining from across the pond. We loved seeing you here today, and you have an open invitation. Come back and join us anytime, please.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. I definitely will. Thanks so much.
Okay, hang out for a second. Go in the back. Go backstage. Grab some snacks. I'll see you back there in a minute. I'm going to run a quick commercial spot for our print on demand.
Ebooks are great, but there's just something about having your words in print. Something you can hold in your hands, put on a shelf, sign for a reader. That's why we created D2D Print, a print-on-demand service that was built for you. We have free, beautiful templates to give your book a pro look, and we can even convert your ebook cover into a full wraparound cover for print. So many options for you and your books. And you can get started right now at drafttodigital.com.